Absolutely not.
Every time the axolotl buddy gets in trouble, the penguin waddles in. Like, I think that's a problem with life, is that too many of us don't have a penguin who will waddle in when someone asks if we're welcome.
It's so real of you.
Yeah.
We got to be careful not to make Erin laugh, though, because he might tear off her eyelashes.
I'd appreciate that. That you don't.
No humor. Do not say anything funny, Alex.
Well, I made my name Mon Mothma's anxiety.
Well, I made it so you can't see who has what name, so.
I saw Aaron's the immortal hockey.
Yeah, I'm so surprised that bitch lived.
You spelled it the way they
Twice.
spell it in One Piece, which I appreciate.
Isn't that how it's spelled?
I don't know. Probably. That's how they spell it in One Piece too, though. I was just saying.
So clearly Alex and I both listened to the book and did not read it.
I didn't read a single thing.
I mostly did that, but I get a package deal where I buy the book and get it on Kindle as well for not too much more. So,
Oh, nice.
plus I write this all off on my taxes,
Hell yeah.
which are still
Love.
pretty bad. But all right, we've been live for a while, folks. So let's get started. Alex,
Yes.
let's get started.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Crazy way to lob it up. Just say nothing.
Okay.
Alex, we discussed this last week.
We did?
I'm gaslighting you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Come on, Alex. You said you were gonna do it.
Welcome,
Yeah, we all heard-
members, to our monthly book club. This month we read.
Hello,
and
folks. Hello, folks, and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast, a podcast where we always list the name of the podcast as part of the introduction. This is our special members-only episode, our book club, where we're discussing a book that just came out a couple of weeks ago. The book is The Mask of Fear, book 1 of the Reign of Empire series, and this one is by Alexander Freed. It's a great book. I hope you've read it. If you haven't, you may well want to hit pause and go back and read it. We will be throwing out a lot of spoilers, but we'll start with some general discussion. And just to set the scene a little bit, is a book that takes place pretty much immediately after Revenge of the Sith, around about the same time as season 1 of The Bad Batch. And it is a long book, and I will say that audiobooks and books in general are not always the easiest for people to consume, especially younger people who are brain-addled by being online all day. I'm
Okay.
kidding.
They're referring to me.
I am referring to a number of people. I'm actually saying, Alex, there was a breakdown in communication. And so Alex and Erin either were told / were reminded that they were supposed to read this book in about 5 days.
Mhm.
And they both finished a 17-hour book on tape in 5 days. And I want to give so much thanks and so much admiration to them for that. And Alex, I know this was especially a struggle for you for completely legitimate reasons, being 100% genuine. And remember that I have no ability to process visual art, so I totally get where you're coming from. Alex, what'd you think of this book?
Yeah, great question. Also, real quick, shout out to Erin for letting me use her Audible account. An absolute queen. What? Secret? Okay, cut
Yeah, let's
that
maybe
out.
not discuss committing fraud.
Oh, good point. Cut that out. Sorry. Okay,
Also, I kind of love the face that my face is frozen on.
I do as well.
Great.
Yeah, so
Run it
this
back.
book, I really enjoyed it. I feel like I kind of got a lot of what I have been asking for about kind of seeing the inner workings of what goes on in the Imperial Senate, kind of the back channelings. If I'm being completely honest, there was a lot of names and a lot of like subplots. It was a little hard for me to keep track of everything, and it might have just been the fact that I was reading the book in such a short period, or listening to the book in such a short period of time at
Mhm.
1.5 times speed. Probably did not help. But in general, there was just a lot of subplots, a lot of different moving parts. There were sometimes a little hard for me to keep track of, but like once, the gist of the different stories, I found really interesting. I think I found Bail and Mon Mothma, but Bail Organa and Mon Mothma a bit more interesting than Saw Gerrera's story in this book, partially because I felt like Saw Gerrera was really like a side character in his own story. It was
Mhm.
more about some other individuals around him, which we'll get into as we discuss more. But yeah, I don't know. Erin, what did you think?
I thought it was a great book. It was definitely a struggle. So thank you for the shout out, Matthew. I do appreciate it because I listened to a 30-minute chapter about Mon being interrogated about politics while on a run. And that was horrible.
Slay.
Yeah.
But I I did enjoy most of the book, aside from that moment. Although that moment was also very good. I'm going to be honest. I was engaged while I was running, but it's the picture I'm painting. No, I really enjoyed it. I honestly didn't realize Saw was supposed to be like a central character, though. I really thought it was like about Bale and Mon for the most part.
Yeah, I would say I would not name him as a central character in this. I think his participation is important, and a lot of what this book is setting up is the way that the characters are going to work together. But in many ways, yeah, he is kind of a side character. I think that the two main characters really are Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, with then a number of supporting characters set up, and Saw being one of them.
The only reason I said that is that all the reviews and the way it's described on like all of the like Penguin Random House, all the selling sites literally gives this the little summary as this book told through the eyes of Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera, which is what confused me when I read it. And Saw Gerrera was not at all a main character compared to Mon Mothma and Bail Organa.
Yeah,
that's the reason I said that was because it's in the summary of the book, but it's published to the world. He is listed with the other two.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And I do think that although it's mostly the other two, I do think that's an important, like to me, if I was to give a summary of the book, it would be about how those three characters take three different, excuse me one second. Got something stuck in my throat. It would be about how these three different characters, Mon Mothma, Bail Organa. All right, finally swallowed it. Really trying to swallow. I might have to spit. Excuse me. There we go. It's really about how these three different characters, Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera, and then all the people around them, have three fairly different strategies of how to respond to Chancellor Palpatine becoming the Emperor and the beginning of the Imperial power, and how they wind up to some extent coming to work together. And we're going to talk all about that, but I first want to say what I think is, to me at least, and I wonder how you all saw this, but for me at least, the other, I think, really essential thing to know about understanding this book is that if you think it is coincidental that they're writing a book about different people responding to, and for the most part, not knowing how to, and kind of screwing up, trying to respond to a authoritarian government taking over and getting rid of democracy, if you think it is coincidental that that's happening at this time in United States history or even world history, you'd be very wrong. What do you guys think, or if you thought about it at all, in terms of this book as reflection and commentary on the real world events of today?
Yeah, well, it's funny because so I think that, like, obviously this book had to have been in the works long before Donald Trump was actually elected to office and before the politics of the current era took full control. But when Andor was released, it was already, I think, created like a level of commentary on, that administration and how, politics were in the world. And this book naturally is a continuation. I think this book, it was originally intended to come out close to Andor season 2. Not because, the timelines necessarily line up. Obviously, Rogue One and Andor is farther along, but we're seeing similar characters involved in that show. So I think that was the original intention. But I think as it comes out now and you read it, there are so many undeniable and very direct references to our current situation in America and the world as a whole, as we see a rise in authoritarianism, fascism, themes of the Empire, themes of Palpatine that have existed in the Star Wars universe, but are being, I think, amplified in this book. I mean, throughout the book, I'm reading this and I had to stop for a second and be like, wait, am I listening to the news or am I listening to this book? It just felt almost too parallel, down to some of it was actually kind of scary for me, Matthew and Aaron, if I'm being honest. Because you get to the point where towards the end where Mon is we've passed this bill, the Senate's gonna have control, and then Mas Amedda's just no, you're not. The Emperor's just gonna veto that. He's absolute power, and that's the fear I live in every day in the world of yes, balances of power technically still exist. The institutions are there, but how strong? And Mon Mothma, I think, even makes a quote at some point, like which will stand and which will fall, which pillars will hold together. It's scary.
Yeah. Aaron, what about you?
Yeah, I don't stay overly up to date on current world news. I obviously know what's happening as far as the political climate.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lot of this like was very scary. I feel like, especially like you said, Alex, kind of those last few chapters, like when Mon's released from the hospital, but then immediately taken to be intimidated. I was like just getting this like sinking feeling, like just shivers. I was like, no, I hate the way this story is going.
Yeah.
I don't like that. So yeah, it's definitely somewhat or very much so parallel. And it's uncomfortable, such that I haven't really thought about it.
That's fair. And we're not going to talk about that, but I think it's worth noting from the beginning because it does seem like it's a very intentional point of the book is to make those parallels. And it's a little like I think it was very much an intentional part of Andor. And frankly, as we've talked about, has been a part of Star Wars since the very beginning. Not to repeat the dead horse, but the idea that Star Wars hasn't been woke since 1977 is completely ridiculous. And this is a very, very woke book in that regard, or at least is much more about like, hey, what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Hungary, what's happening in all these places is really bad. And it's funny because immediately before reading this book, I read the new Hunger Games book that just came out, which also, and Suzanne Collins herself has said, she only writes when she has something to say. And what very clearly happened with that book, which we'll review on Superhero Ethics, my other podcast, is she really wanted to talk about propaganda and how we are all complicit in the fear-mongering of propaganda that led to the current situations in the US and so many other places. And she decided to use the story of Haymitch and his reaping and his Hunger Games as a vehicle to tell that. And it was wonderful to read, but really hard to read. I think I'm more politically invested, or I think I'm more politically engaged than both of you, but I still find it really hard at times as well, and often want to take a break. And so I was thinking like, okay, cool. I'm going to step back from that world a little bit and read some Star Wars instead. And it was kind of fun because I went into this book having I didn't know what time period it was about. I didn't know what characters it was about. I knew nothing.
Me too.
And then within like 30 pages, we're reading about how a couple of senators are dithering because they have no idea what to do as this Authorian takes over. I was like, oh my God. And I think it is a complete coincidence that, I'm going to say that wrong. And as you said, obviously, Alex, this book has been in the works for a while. The fact that we literally had this moment of Chuck Schumer not sure whether or not to vote for this bill to, support Trump, and a lot of people being very angry at the Senate Democrats. There's no way this book was critical of that because I think that happened after this book was published. But it felt like kind of perfect timing. And clearly I feel like the author was being very predictive of what would happen, as well as talking about all of the dynamics that happened in that first term, with this constant attempt to be like, oh, okay, this will be the scandal that will get Trump. This will be the scandal that will get Trump, which I feel is very much mirrored in Mothma and Bail, both thinking like, this is the thing we'll do that will turn the whole galaxy against the Chancellor, now the Emperor. And Mas Amedda kind of being right of saying like, nope, we've won. This war is over. The propaganda war is over and you've lost. So with that kind of setup, we will talk about the main story primarily. Let me attempt to give a plot summary, and I'm not going to cover everything by any means, but I think I'm going to hopefully get kind of the main points. Because a lot of it really isn't about the plot. It's about sort of all the discussions that happen along the way. We start with the Chancellor taking over and with everyone kind of coming to terms with what has happened to the Jedi and how upset everyone is about what's happened to the Jedi. And with Bail Organa winds up literally going to Jedha and it's kind of fun to see a lot more of Jedha that we hear about so much in Rogue One, obviously. And we see this kind of like memorial and this like communal grieving of the people of Jedha for the Jedi. And that's really what kind of sets Bail on his mission of like, what I have to do is to figure out what really happened to the Jedi and why they became like these scapegoats. And he goes off on this mission to prove that the Jedi weren't really a problem, that they were the scapegoats, and that fear was used against them. And again, here the commentary is very obvious to me of, if you substitute the word Jedi for transgender in terms of the points that they're making about like stirring up public hate against a group to justify the powers that you want, it's the exact same story.
Mm-hmm.
Mon Mothma, meanwhile, she's dealing with all the people who are the Council of 2000, or no, is it the Committee of 2000? What's the exact phrase they used?
I don't remember. Coalition?
I think it's a coalition of 2000. And this is kind of a great deep cut. And also, I want to hear for a second what you thought of this, because you're a big fan of Revenge of the Sith,
Sure
that
am.
movie. This is primarily something that was established in deleted scenes from that movie, in which Mon Mothma and Padme are collecting senators, and they get 2,000 senators to sign on to say that they think that the Chancellor has taken too much power onto himself, that he needs to step down, that he needs to give back some of these emergency powers. And of course, kind of in some ways, I really wish that scene had been kept in, because I think one of the great tragedies of Revenge of the Sith, if you have those scenes in, is that Padme is working for the same goal as the Jedi Council, and Anakin's kind of stuck in the middle, not listening to either one. I'll tell more of the story in a bit, but for both of you, but especially for you, Alex, what was it like having that be such a central part of the story?
Yeah, my 5-second statement real quick on that is I think that most of the deleted scenes of Revenge of the Sith should have been included, and it's a sin they were not. But that one specifically is one of my favorites that were removed, because, like you said, I mean, first of all, it established something we didn't get to really see in visually, at least, in the movies, of like the closeness of Padme with Mon Mothma, with the other senators. Like, I would have loved to see Padme like doing legislation more in those movies, and so seeing like this whole book, it really felt like Bail and Mon were doing what they were doing, not just for Padme, but like with Padme and her memory very much on their minds, like as a driving force. And so I really did appreciate that connection, Revenge of the Sith, and the way that they were like, Padme was a friend of the Jedi, and like Bail was such a Jedi like sympathizer and believer, and he's like, even if he doesn't always agree with Mon, he was like, Padme brought us together. Padme was the glue, and without her, like, we're lost in a way. And it just makes you think more and more about like what the Empire would have been like. I mean, I know that Palpatine would have found a way to kill her or silence Padme, but like what could she have done before he did that would have been really interesting for me to see.
Yeah, very much so. Aaron, what about yourself?
I've seen a lot about the deleted scenes. I don't think I've ever sat down and like watched through
They're
all of them
wonderful.
in a row.
Mhm.
So might have to do that sometime soon. But I've definitely remind me, the quote of like, "This is how democracy dies" to thunderous applause. Is that in the movie?
That is in the movie, yeah.
Okay, that is in the movie. Crazy quote. Just saying. But I honestly didn't know that connection until you just said it. So
that makes sense.
like I was like, okay, the coalition of 2000.
I'm really glad you brought it up, Matthew. I was going to bring it up, but I wasn't sure if anyone was to know what I was talking about.
Oh yeah. No, and it's really played as an important plot. And I think this is the best way to do it. Is instead of just giving a full summary at the beginning, I'm going to kind of walk us through the plot, and then anytime you guys want to jump in and talk to me about it, let me know.
Okay.
But yeah, so Mon is trying to like get that group back together, and really struggling. Actually, let me start again. And I'll say, Alex, I totally agree with you about kind of the spirit of Padme being what is driving both Bail and Mon. And I think it's in many ways, this book is kind of a love letter to her, because there's really the sense of that she is what they both need. Like the three of them together would have been this really powerful force, and that without her, like, because she could kind of bridge the differences between the two of them. And I really like how you start to see the two of them separating, and they spend a lot of this book in massive conflict, as well as both of them kind of holding themselves against Saw as well. So Mon Mothma is trying to get the group of 2000 back together, but a lot of them are breaking away. A lot of them are saying this is pointless now. A lot of them are saying, well, but like, look at how the Emperor has won. Maybe we should listen to him. Maybe he's right about the Jedi. And again, I just really heard like again, I'm reading this from my own leftist eyes, but like all the frustrations about like the Democrats not unifying but capitulating too much and stuff like that. But if you don't look at it as that modern political situation, it's so many others of like, do you capitulate to the authoritarian power? Do you fight against it? How do you fight against it? Very much themes of this book. And so Bail and Maud really have kind of a falling out. She wants to try and like stay and think that we can work through the Senate to defeat him. Bail wants to go off on his own. We get the subplot about a character named Hockey that I think is spelled Hoki. It's not spelled Hockey, but all of us thought that listening to it on tape because that's very much what we hear. And she's a Republic security officer. She's kind of part of the Republic CIA or Secret Service or whatever. And she believes in the Empire. She cares about the Empire, but mostly she just believes in like all the people she works with, a lot of whom are now getting cut off because apparently they're just kind of like throwing to the winds all these former Republic agents and stuff like that. And so she winds up kind of tailing Organa and winds up helping him as he goes off on this mission to try and prove that the evidence that they have against the Jedi is forgery. And they get to have some crazy adventures, and you get some further adventures of other characters that are connected to them. It seems she's the race that she is kind of like a bird-like species that I don't think we've heard of before,
Hockey?
right? Yeah.
She is Heptunian, and I'm gonna drop a photo in the group chat. Y'all, these motherfuckers are terrifying. I looked it up and I was like, Jesus Christ.
My
God.
We will, of course.
So you let me know if you saw that. If you saw this motherfucker spying on you, would you shit yourself? Because I would.
By the group chat. Oh yeah. That they're pretty scary looking.
Really scary.
This brings up though a kind of point kind of connected to what Alex was saying. I have in the past thought that I didn't like that Star Wars often would drop the same names over and over again because it sometimes felt like it made the universe a little bit too small. I feel like on some level this book was kind of teaching me my lesson because yes, we have seen the species before, but very much in a kind of blink and you miss it way. As Alex mentioned, there are so many new characters, and I kept waiting for ones who would be connected to people we knew. And like, it's all new people. Like we got to hear about so many of Saw's people, but we never heard about Two Tubes or anything like that.
Yeah, that was throwing me off. I was just like, good. I almost wanted like a separate, like no offense to Saw, and like I think his story and having that difference is an important viewpoint in this book, but the level of detail I felt like almost deserved its own book. I just couldn't keep track of everyone.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Especially because it's. I love the Star Wars books, but sometimes it is a bit of a struggle when a character is describing an alien race, but like we may not even know the name of that alien race. We just know, oh, it's like this character's name.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, I think, when you're reading a book to connect to it. Like I love the books, but I think that is sometimes a struggle, and that was very much a struggle in this book.
Yeah, and I feel like Hockey, like I think if I could just speak to Hockey, I think Hockey was a very cool character. I was I was really like, it's funny because going into this book, I was like Bail Organa as a character. This book made me love Bail Organa. And to see like how he operated alongside this agent, like, he was clearly not trusting of her. But she like was one of those people. I'm not saying exactly like him, but kind of a similar vibe of like Agent Callus and Rebels of like clearly believes in the Empire, but also like has reservations to some level, or like trusts more the people that like she knows more than like the Empire as a whole, and just kind of believes that like she's doing her job, yada yada. And so like those individuals are the ones that like I feel like were really essential in bringing down the Empire as a whole. It's like the ones that had the power, got there with the Empire, but then like their true loyalties weren't to Palpatine, but were to other people or other causes.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I liked for Hockey is that throughout the book, they would have her say like, well, as long as it's for the Republic
Right.
or the Empire, or sometimes she wouldn't even catch herself and just like would say the Republic. And I was like, see, like that's the type of commitment I can understand. You know, she's just kind of like, yeah, like it was what it was. And you're still like, this is the FBI. So here we go.
Yep.
Aaron, did you, when you read those lines, did you ever hear Rex yelling for the Republic in your head?
No, I'm sorry. I was way too locked into this book. I listened, to this book for 11 hours straight on Saturday, and it was
Yeah, I
great,
locked in
but
for like 7 hours, I think, one day. You know, I feel though.
I disassociated the next day.
That's fair. That's
I
fair.
didn't know where I was.
I didn't know
I mean, it's
where
an
I was.
incredibly engaging book. Like I kind of drove my partner crazy because like I wanted to just like keep the headphones on, and listen to nothing but this book while she was trying to be like, hey, can we like, have a conversation and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's Bale's story is he's trying to like rescue the legacy of the Jedi, and he discovers all this stuff about that basically that there's like we learn a bit more about kind of the underworld of Coruscant and like who does holograph forgeries and stuff like that, and learn more about how it is that Palpatine convinced everybody that that the Jedi were really this kind of like terrible cult that was trying to take over and all this. And then meanwhile, we have the storyline that's happening in Saw Gerrera, which is that him and his people are trying to figure out what comes next. They know that they like had been working with the Republic, but they really don't like this empire. They're going to keep fighting. And they're kind of turning into kind of pirates. And they wind up kind of raiding the ship that winds up kind of like waking up this kind of half android, half person. I don't know if this is accurate, but when I read about him, I kept thinking of Lobot from
same thing, Matthew.
Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, he's an augmented human named Sujen.
He's not human.
Oh, he's not human. You're correct. Again, his race, though, is one I think we've never heard of before, correct?
I pictured Lobot, but like
Yeah.
alien and jacked.
Yeah, that seems fair. So tell me about Sujen. Who is Sujen and what'd you think of him?
Sujan was the most confounding character in the whole book for me.
Yeah.
He just like hearing his thoughts. So basically, like, for our listeners, like Sujan was created by the Separatists, volunteered to be augmented, and was essentially seen as like this like ultimate weapon sleeper agent to be used. His databases or databanks were filled with information on enemies to the separatist republic, nobility, and tons of information basically. And his loyalties deep down ended up being to like his people, his race, but like he kind of seemed to just have resigned himself to this role of like living weapon.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see him like bounce from like, I'll work for you, Saw Gerrera, I'll work for you, Bail Organa, I'll work for whoever. Like he just kind of like didn't really ever feel like he had a home. And we learned that like the Empire had destroyed his clan and his home, but like it just felt like a very like it was sad almost. Like it was like this lost individual who never felt like he really believed in any direct cause, but like did what he did because he felt just alone in the world and in the galaxy. And this was a way for him to feel like some semblance of purpose. I don't know. Is that how y'all interpreted him?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, yeah, definitely like a lost soul. I think it was interesting. I never saw him as like joining anyone's group really. And I'm sure you saw this way too, but like in his head, he's always like, and I guess I'll work with them until I decide to kill them.
No,
until they're no longer useful or until something better comes along.
He did plan how to kill everyone.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately. He's like, couldn't help myself. Just thinking about how to kill you. Like, but yeah, I feel like he definitely was trying to figure out what the purpose was. Because when, like you kind of said, when he first came out of the pod, as we may say, his little stasis pod, all he was thinking is just like, okay, gotta fuck up the Republic. Like the Separatists are gone, gotta fuck up the Republic. Don't know how, don't know where. First one I see, I'm gonna fuck him up. Like that was literally, he's like, this motherfucker running down the aisle, who are you? I'm gonna kill you. I don't know.
Aaron read a Star Wars book.
Right? Definitely narrate one.
Ooh, I would love that.
You like an interpretation of it.
An interpretation.
Yeah, I think I'm with you both. Like to me, he's a character who is, it's not that he's a fanatic of the cause. It's that because he has nothing left, he's like, well, I might as well dedicate myself to this cause to give my life some meaning.
That's a good way of putting it.
We get some of his backstory. In some ways, him and his people kind of remind me of the Nogri of the Empire, where like they're very dedicated to the Separatists because their people's going through this horrible trauma. That they're kind of like genetically, they're breeding themselves out because they're kind of like a lot of them can't reproduce anymore. It's not really given in too much detail. And it's not the Separatists are causing this, but it does seem the Separatists are kind of like using this to, or at least the Separatist leaders who he works with, to kind of like get them to help him in exchange for helping them.
Yeah, like the only reason that Sujen agreed or volunteered rather, as they love to point out, to be like this weapon was because they were promised like genetic like scientists and people to help them like try and figure it out and aid from the separatists.
Right.
And I think the separatists used that as a ploy to get like multiple people from his clan. And like I'm sure the Empire does the same.
Yeah. And I do think, and this is going to lead me into kind of one of the next major things I think that this book gave me, at least. I'm curious how you felt about it. It does seem like while the separatists are not being great either, they're at least recognizing the pain and offering to help, something the Republic never did. And it's funny, especially given like, I think it was just literally like last episode or the one before it, I was saying like, I still don't know why I'm supposed to think the separatists were bad and why it was so bad for the separatists to break off from the Republic. And I feel like that's one of the major themes of this book. And they kind of take this interesting direction of that there were people who had very legitimate gripes against the Republic, and that when the Republic wouldn't listen to their gripes, they wanted to break away. At which point people like General Grievous and the corporate interests kind of like took over the separatist cause, and they weren't great, but that there were a lot of fundamentally good people within the separatists, and that a lot of them have really legitimate reasons to be pissed at the Republic and now the Empire.
Yeah, I want to talk about that just because I like this concept. So when this concept with the separatists are not just like faceless bad group, like that was first kind of explored in the Clone Wars. We're going to touch on that episode eventually when we go back to talking about it. But like that idea, I think, has slowly kind of been expanded upon in different forms of Star Wars media since that initial idea came out, a decade or whatever, however long ago that was. Much longer, I know. But it was one of the most interesting parts of this book to me is that like, I mean, we know that like Palpatine played everyone, and we know that like the two sides of the war, at the end of the day, like the people were not that different. Like the people at the heart of the issues, they weren't doing any of the manipulating, not the banking clan, not the corporate interests, but the people that generally just wanted peace and freedom from all of the corruption were very similar. I mean, you saw that with again in the Clone Wars episodes. But like in here, you get to see like Mon Mothma go before this separatist shadow council that exists, and like as they talk, like Padme's like I'm just being used as like a piece of like an offering to secure this guy's power over I can't remember his name, one of the separatist senators or representatives, power over these other separatists. But then as they go on, they're like, wait, we kind of have common ground. We kind of believe similar things even after the war. And the separatists make it very clear of this idea of like, just because the war is over doesn't mean our belief in our cause is over. Doesn't mean we just want to stop fighting for, no more corruption, no more corporate control, stuff like that. But like separatists very willingly admit, like we naively believed that, if push came to shove, the corporate backers would like acquiesce to the will of the people. We believe that Count Dooku would listen to us, and like they admit their wrongdoings. Well, even Bail Organa struggles to directly say we fucked up. He's like, I can see the argument, I understand this, and I'm like, Bail, just say it, brother. Like, just admit you got played, you were wrong, you played into the Emperor's hands. But separatists are plainly saying it. They're like, we were foolish, we had a dream, we believed in it, we fucked up. Why can't like fucking Mon or Bail just straight up admit that?
Yeah, Sujan actually directly calls out Bail on that.
Yeah,
he's like, Sujan, says all these things about the Republic, and he's like, well, yes, but the separatists, and Sujan's like, no, why can you not just like stay on this?
And one more real quick thing. I'm sorry, Matt. It relates back to what you brought up before. How, and I'm not allowed to be super political because of my job, but the Democrats are doing very similar things. They're like, but the Republicans, but this, and not taking ownership over mistakes their party has made and the massive role they have played into getting us in the situation we're in now. And I'm very passionate about it. Makes me very angry, but also like it makes this book so good for that reason. Sorry to interrupt you. I just had to.
No, especially because it's about the Republic senators not being willing to take account of their support for a war. And that's whether you want to talk about what's happening right now in Gaza, or you want to talk about like, all the anger against like Hillary and Biden, all them for Iraq, like whatever it is. But pulling us back to this, I'm also glad you mentioned Dooku, because I thought it's a throwaway line. You read it once and you miss it, and they never touch on it again. but it's such a great example of how propaganda can play out. One of the separatists says, completely believing it, we knew Dooku was on our side. Dooku was going to do the right thing. But then the evil, warlike General Grievous took over. I was just like, oh, that's an interpretation of history that's very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. I was just thinking about it a few minutes ago, and I was like, was that in this book?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna, I probably missed that line.
Yeah. Well, and so Sujan's story, like, it becomes wrapped up with Bales, and Bale is obviously very critical of Saw, and very much has this kind of like high and mighty attitude of like, I am going to work within the systems, even though he's kind of breaking laws left and right to try and get this information to help the Jedi. But we'll put that aside. And eventually he convinces Sujan to help him get this information about the real Jedi that kind of proves that this whole conspiracy is false. But things go wrong, and Sujan winds up now connected to Mon Mothma. It's a very convoluted plot. And I'm going to go back and tell some of the other stories, but I just want to run Sujan's to the end. And Sujan basically makes clear he's in that same attitude you were like. He was like, well, all right, I can't take down the Empire with this Jedi stuff, and I can't trust anyone. I'm going to go kill Palpatine. That sounds fun. At which point, because one of the other major plot points has been all the separatists being reallowed into the Republic, into the Empire again, and thus having political power, Mon Mothma needs their political power to pass her bill, which we'll talk about in a second. And because of that, and because the separatists know that if Sujan does this thing, it'll make all the separatists look bad and stop them being reintegrated, Mon blows him up using a code word that they teach him, because he's like a living bomb. What'd you think about that?
And
that
just for our readers, I want to get a little more specific. The separatists implanted a way for basically to use them as bombs without them knowing. So like you say a code word, 5 minutes later you say a second code word, and they detonate. And the right. Individuals who are augmented, supposedly, I mean, we have our own theories, but supposedly are not supposed to be aware of this inclusion. Like, they know that they can self-destruct on their own merit, but they're unaware that someone else can activate it. But yeah, I was actually pretty pissed at Mon for doing that.
I was shocked. Like, when she was just like saying something like, well, I do have to warn you. And she said oubliette. I was like, that's a weird ass word that nobody ever says. That was so on purpose. And I was like, oh shit. Like, is she really gonna, really? I'm like, honestly, I'm kind of with Sujan. Just fucking kill the Emperor.
Yeah, so
kill the Emperor. Like, I don't know.
I just don't understand what was, like, I'm curious what y'all think. Like, what was her? I don't know. Like, I mean, like, if he goes and tries to kill the Emperor, like, is she afraid that like they're just gonna like lock things down more? Like, it felt like crazy to me that she would murder him for wanting to kill the Emperor.
I see exactly where she was going with it, though, because if Sujan succeeds, then all the separatists are immediately villainized. They're immediately no longer integrated. There goes all of the votes she worked so hard for. She still fully believes that this bill is gonna somehow rein in Palpatine. She doesn't realize that politics are no good anymore. And she sees Sujan as like the pinnacle of the way to fuck up her entire plan. Is like, this motherfucker could ruin it all. And I've spent months. And And so I feel like it was very much like politically about like the bill and just like the fallout afterwards.
Yeah, and I think in this way, she's meant to represent, I mean, you can say the Democrats of the last 8 years, but also you can say like, the people opposing Hitler in the Reichstag, or like Neville Chamberlain, or like whoever it is, where a person's come along who's basically using the institutions and the breakability of the institutions to break everything. But there are people who are like, no, if we still use the institutions, we can take them down. And she comes up with this bill called the Imperial Rebirth Act, which is about like accepting that there's going to be an empire, but basically she wants to turn Palpatine into a figurehead and give all the power back to the Senate. And I think you're exactly right, Aaron, that she really kind of tunnel visions on that, because she can't let go of the idea that maybe politics doesn't work anymore. And that's why that scene with the Grand Vizier at the end is so important, where he basically is like, you're trying to play a game that I've already won, and I think it's
Give up.
He's like, we changed the game. Like,
yeah.
it's not
And
the same
Alex, I
game.
think you're supposed to be mad at her. I think she's one of the villains of this story in some ways, but in some ways also it's her heroic origin story, because to me, one of the main points of the story is that at the very end, her and Bail Organa turn to Saw Gerrera and say, we need to work with you. Because it's really a story about how two people who fundamentally believe in the system finally come to accept that the system is so broken that they have to work with people who are going outside the system to make anything change.
Well, it's funny because the entire time, as I get to the end of this book, I kept thinking about, and I know this is probably a deeper cut, but like, there's one scene in the Rebels TV show where Saw Gerrera contacts Mon Mothma, and she tells me in this book, "Don't contact me." And it made me immediately think about the one time he does contact her through that like courier droid, and they get into that heated argument, and Saw basically like goads her into this passionate like rant, and it's like it was just cool to see like the beginning of these relationships, because then like I'm rewatching Andor right now for a lot of reasons, but I'm gonna go back and rewatch some of the episodes that include Mon and Saw and Bail. But like it's so interesting to me to see like how this book sets them up, and then see like how these beliefs shaped their policies and their actions as the series moves forward, because we see like little pockets of Bail and Mon, in Rogue One and in Rebels and in Bad Batch, and all these different little places. And maybe not in Bad Batch. They're in Bad Batch, right? For an episode.
Yeah.
And it's just cool to me. Like, I mean, as you all know, I love when Star Wars connects like this. And so I was very focused on like those relationships and just trying to remember like, how does Mon act? Like, how does she react when things do like eventually like shit hits the fan? It was just cool to me. I don't know. Like Mon, definitely more of a villain in this story, a villain and a victim. I mean, she was tortured a whole bunch. But like it is her like origin story of like, fuck it, burn it down. I like, fine. You don't want to play within. I can't play within the reins of politics. I'm gonna do the shit I do in Andor, and then I'm gonna break away from the fucking Senate, and I'm gonna go full rogue rebel and help lead the rebellion, and eventually become the goddamn chancellor.
Yep.
I feel like this is definitely like a big turning point for Mon. I agree, like and I think it was important to like kind of tell that story, because she seems such like a perfect figure of like. I was explaining this story to one of my clients, and he was like, "Who's Mon Mothma? Like, can you describe her?" And I was like, "Tall, always wears white, red, short hair." Right. And I feel like it's very intentional. She's depicted very like angelic.
Yeah.
And she's very much, like the pacifist, very much like and I think, like you said, Alex, it's two people who work within the system, like two senators turning to someone like who's fine with violence, but it's not just them like admitting that politics doesn't work. It's two pacifists, like really, really strict pacifists.
Bail was a little more firebrand, I feel like, but like Padme was the one who was willing to get her fucking hands dirty, as opposed to these two.
Well, Bail, I mean, they show him kind of turning through this book because we haven't mentioned it yet, but he gave his Senate chain codes to Saw as like some sort of a deal that they made. And then he asked Saw, or kind of said, the only condition is that nobody dies. And then Saw used the chain code to obviously blow up a whole bunch of fucking people at an Imperial facility. Then Bail was super pissed about it. And Saw was like, "You're a delusional baby if you think people aren't going to die." Like,
I think in many ways it's about their loss of naivete. It's that both Bail and Mon have been kind of spoiled and kind of privileged, in that they've never really had to deal with just how bad things even are and were under the Republic, but also are now becoming. And it's about them kind of having to realize, like, no, you can't just call Dad. You can't just call the cops and expect that everything's going to be okay.
Can't call the Jedi anymore.
There's a couple of quotes that I want to read. We'll only do one at a time and also break in other things, but I just want to say this. This is from as Mon is really kind of coming to realize how much the Senate is falling apart, and that she can't trust the people who she wants to rally to her side. And again, tell me if this feels familiar at all. She didn't have the votes, not even close. and not even of the ex-separatist worlds did come on board. To the delegation of 2000, that's what it was. Too many of the delegation of the 2000 had given up. Senator after senator had seen the direction the galaxy was going and thrown in with Palpatine. Senator Mali Day, one of the delegation's most ferocious voices, had simply said, "The people have spoken. What does it matter if I believe they are wrong when I am their sworn servant? Is it not the truest act of democracy to trust the public will?" And she later talks about why that's very much not the case. And it goes on. Others were more or less self-serving. Several delegation members, Initios Eady foremost among them, had argued that the Empire's age and the injuries that Jedi had dealt him suggested his reign wouldn't last, saying, "In a handful of years, the Emperor will be gone. That will be our time, and moving prematurely will only exhaust us." Which, if that does not sound familiar to you, is exactly the kind of language people have used about Trump for a long time.
Sure is.
Yeah.
What else from this book really kind of struck you guys, or do you want to jump into?
So I just want to touch real quick. I think we haven't really gotten to talk about him too much, but just Bail. I really, again, like, Homeboy went to bat for his beliefs, and like, again, it was like a way for him to learn, like, you can't just like hyper focus on one thing and like expect to get results. But he believed so wholeheartedly. He was like, I can exonerate the Jedi. I can exonerate them, and I need to. It is my duty to exonerate them. And I was like, you know what? I always knew like you love the Jedi, but this just to me like makes like his relationship with Obi-Wan's trust in him. It makes it make more sense to me, and it makes like it just makes me like love his character more because he's like, not only did he trust the Jedi, but he's like, I trusted Padme, and she knew the love of the Jedi better than anyone. And I'm sure that he was referencing both Anakin and also just like the general love the Jedi Order had for her, like the relationship. And to me, like this book did a great job at like displaying, I don't know, just displaying like how like he remained very like loyal to his friends and his people. And it just made me actually more sad. I kept thinking about how he just gets wrecked on Alderaan by the Death Star later, and I'm just like, fuck. Like, this dude was like, he went up to bat and died such an unceremonious death that like I would want to cry about more now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love seeing more of Bail's character and like his connection to the Jedi. And we didn't get it until the very end of the book, but it mentions like after kind of the adventure's over, he's back on Alderaan, you know, deciding like, oh, being a father is actually, you know, being alive for your child and not fighting silly little things because it fits your ego.
Who would have thunk it?
He's finally come to that realization. And he's walking through the gardens at the palace, and he comes upon this statue of a Jedi that apparently used to like live on Alderaan and was part of the community, and Bail was very fond of him when Bail was a child. And I just thought it was very cool to like hear some of the background of why he loved the Jedi so like passionately. And then also just his maturity in the moment of like, and I said goodbye to the statue because we're putting it into storage tomorrow, because if the Empire comes asking, or when Leia grows up and her friends start asking like who that is, like, can't have that statue here anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it made me really want to rewatch the Rebels books. Rewatch the episodes of Rebels about Princess Leia and read there's some what's the book about kind of teenage Leia that we talked about last year on this podcast?
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
It's gonna drive me crazy. It was Leia, Princess of Alderaan.
Leia of Alderaan?
Leia, yeah, I'll do it on the air. Yeah, I think you're so right. It reminds me a lot of the book Leia, Princess of Alderaan, which talks about her as a teenager, and it's about kind of like Bail and Brea sort of slowly coming to realize that, you know, they have to bring her in and they have to start telling her the truth about things. And you're right. I think like on the one hand, it's a really powerful thing for Bail to understand, like wait a minute, I've got to be more careful, because if I risk my life, not only am I risking myself, but I'm risking like, Brea's husband and Leia's father. But the flip side of that, I think, is, and it's funny because this is also very much a theme of Sunrise on the Reaping, the new Hunger Games, is that to some extent that fear can be a part of how authoritarianism controls you. Because when it is, I just have to look out for me and mine and kind of can't help anyone else because they might hurt me and mine. Like, that's a really big part of how collaboration begins. So yeah, it just, in some ways, the idea of trying to summarize this book and talk about this book in 50 minutes is ridiculous, because there's just so much to it. Like, I want to reread it a number of times. I will not make anyone else do it. I'm not going to do it tomorrow. But there's just so much depth to it. And I want to just read one last quote.
Yeah.
And this is again, this is when Mon Mothma is giving a speech in the Senate and trying to get her bill passed, which does get passed. But then, of course, Mas Amedda kind of pulls the rug out from under her. And she's talking about this person who's kind of like a philosopher named Runt, who has kind of like set out the 3 key ideas of democracy. And to some extent, she's quoting a person from her own time, Edwin Burke, who was an Enlightenment philosopher. Not entirely, but especially in the second point. But it relates directly to what we were just saying. And then the third point. The second responsibility is the responsibility to one's own conscience. The second was the responsibility to one's own consciousness. The second was the responsibility to one's own conscience. Root believed that to be nothing but a proxy for the will of the people, very much like that person had said they wanted to be a couple chapters earlier, was to discard a profound ethical burden. She wrote, "At times of crisis, the representative must always defer to her own moral compass." Mon offered the driest of smiles, no matter how dire the polling. This is all the speech she's giving. No one laughed. That was fine. Her job right now is to impress them. Persuasion and bonding could come later. Why, she went on, did Runt elevate the individual conscience above the collective agency of the citizenry? It is because she also saw the third responsibility as the most important, the responsibility to democracy itself. As long as an elected leader prioritizes the continuation of democratic government, as long as that leader respects the rule of law, the people may always choose new representation to better serve their needs. Future generations may atone for the mistakes of the past. Yet should the engine of democracy break down, she wrote, a citizenry will forever be left at the mercy of unaccountable leaders.
Wild.
Yeah. How did that hit you, Aaron?
Just too close to home.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of political philosophy 101 of like, sometimes the mob can be wrong. And like you have to protect government even when the people seem to be crying out for authoritarianism, because once you start down that road, forever will it dominate your destiny. To massively make metaphors from the Star Wars universe.
Great reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, my final thoughts, I think, just on the book as a whole. I think for those who want to get into it, I would not recommend the pace that Aaron and I took.
Yeah. Go slow. Take some breaks.
Go slow. Really like take it in, because it's like the book moves fast. It's like not hard to read, but it's also in a unique way. Like, it is kind of dense. Not like, but I don't want you to like take that as a bad thing. Like, it's dense and there's a lot of really good content layers and then layers in the book. Easy to read, but like, just like Matthew said, like, there's like one-off quotes here and there that like hit you like a ton of bricks that are like, damn, I need to just like write a whole fucking journal entry just on this one line.
Yeah.
And there were dozens of them, and we didn't even get to talk about like the role of the ISB and the torture that goes on to the senators, and there's so many little intricacies within this book, and like little things that like even like little things that just deepen characters. Like, they really make a point to show how much Mon Mothma loves history, and that links back to like her interest in the antique store that is run by Luther in Andor, and like they do a really amazing job at like weaving what we already know about these characters into, their personality in the book, deepening them, letting us understand their trauma, what they go through, everything down to fucking Mon Mothma takes anxiety meds, which, yeah, I would too if I was in her shoes.
All three of us. Like, yep, we hear you, Queen.
Like, it's just, and it's really just, I don't know, it deepens and deepens. One thing I will say, and I'm curious if either of you thought this, when Mom was being held and they described the blonde ISB agent interrogating her, were either one of you waiting for her to introduce herself as the lady from Andor?
Yes.
Like,
yeah, Deirdre.
they never actually named her in the book. I still think it was her. But I just kept waiting for like that connection. Same as you, Matthew. But yeah, I don't know. It's just the book as a whole. As I processed it more since finishing it, really, really enjoyed it. Really loved the deepening of the characters. Makes me like appreciate Mon Mothma and Bail Organa even more than I already did. Makes me even more curious about the fuckery that is Saw Gerrera. And how he ends up where he is in Rogue One makes so much more sense. But yeah, I'm really, and also on top of all of it, this book has me way more excited than Andor season 2 than I even was before, which I didn't think was possible.
It is very much
yeah.
a prequel for Andor. I think that is very
Yes.
intentional, and you're right, the timing of it's perfect.
Yeah.
And that's the one panel I got into for Celebration. So
Ooh, so I want to bring up before we end, I think we would be remiss if we did not bring up Chemish,
Yeah, let's talk
which
about
is
Chemish.
the funniest fucking name and a non-binary icon.
Yeah.
but
Never made a big
Chemish-
deal of, but they use they them pronouns throughout.
And isn't that beautiful? Because it's just a pronoun.
Mm-hmm.
some of their
Anyways.
administration's too. Never mind.
Okay. So
I don't get
Chemish
political.
is hockey's kind of like source. I put source in air quotes because Chemish is actually like an apprentice, but hockey's like, shh, don't tell anybody that. Because hockey's not supposed to train apprentices as part of the, Imperial FBI.
Mm-hmm.
Also, hockey just does whatever hockey wants. We kind of realized throughout this book. And it did bite her in the ass not once, but twice, actually.
Yep. And I don't think they establish what race Chemish is, but I think they're meant to be human, or certainly. And I just bring this up because I think, like, at one point early on, Masamita makes a reference to ladies, gentlemen, and noodleroys, like acknowledging that there's some species that just don't have the male-female gender breakdown we have, which makes sense. The idea that all aliens would be male or female is kind of ridiculous, but I think it's important that they don't I think it's kind of cool to have both characters, to have both some races that are just non-binary by definition, but also to have people who are like, no, in a world of male and female among my type, I am non-binary. And yeah, she's a great character. She's someone I'm really excited to see more of in book 2 and book 3. I do hope let me actually make that our last question. What are you wanting to see more of? Because this is book 1 of a trilogy.
Well, I'm hoping that we just continue. I want to see like the continuation of Bail and Mon Mothma's relationship, because by Rogue One, they seem to be like a little bit closer, more confidant. Like they are leaders within the rebellion, and I'm hoping that these books kind of lead us down. Like, okay, they've learned. They were naive. They've learned their lesson now. Where do they turn their tactics? How does it bleed into what we see in Rogue One? How does it bleed into what we see in the future? I would low-key be really interested to see if we get more, because we only have very I don't think we have an extremely detailed account of how Mon Mothma really escapes the Senate and then fully becomes a rebel. We get accounts, but I would love to get her perspective, first person point of view, breaks away, what pushed her to the brink, what that looks like. Mon becomes closer to what Saw Gerrera is now than what she is currently. And so I'm just hoping we get to see the progression of all of that. And I would, sue me, a brief conversation in book 2 or 3 between Bail and Obi-Wan, just to better establish that there is a relationship there, and Obi-Wan is not just jumping in to save his daughter randomly in the TV series that we see.
Yeah, I can see that. See that.
Me, what I want more of, honestly, hockey has been the bane of my existence. She's pissing me off, and also she's an icon, and I can't get enough. And it's the best because her arc in this book was literally realizing she's old as shit and can't keep up. That was her entire arc. It was like, fuck, I got old.
And yet she is still, there's a scene where Bail Organa goes to an underground club with EDM music, Star Wars version.
Is wild.
And people dealing spice and other things. And he's talking with this criminal underworld guy. And Hockey's I gotta break this up. So she pretends to be a little old lady, but then takes out 3 bouncers and kills one of them in 5 seconds. Clearly she's got moves. She needs a cane, but she can work with a cane,
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. She's like still on it, but like I think has also become very disillusioned with the Empire,
Very much so.
As you should.
being that they tried to kill her. But yeah, I'm excited to see her and Chemish kind of where that ends up. Because Chemish has some very interesting motivations as well. And there was a whole plot line with the 4040s that we're not going to get into, but that was basically like a group that was trying to protest the bill violently.
They were very opposed. They wanted to use a whole bunch of violence to protest the separatists being let back in.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Matthew, for summarizing. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to see more of. One last thing I want to bring up. I should have asked you to find the full quote earlier, Matthew, but I didn't think of it. And since I only have Audible, I only remember the end of the quote. But Bale had this really like beautiful kind of list when he was talking about the Jedi of like different characteristics for all of them. And he said about Plo Koon, like he can't forget, you know, like the kindness of Obi-Wan. He said the irrepressible warmth of Plo Koon.
Yeah.
And that just made me so happy. It made me think about the Wolf Squadron. It made me think of Plo finding baby Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And just like
Baby Ahsoka.
it really drove home that it's like Bale saw the Jedi for who they were.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, again, giving some love to Revenge of the Sith, the book is very explicit that watching that young Padawan get killed in front of him, and even says like the Padawan was fighting back, like he was killing clones, but still, like watching him, you know, that Padawan get killed is such a quick scene, but it's a powerful one. Yeah, and also we didn't even talk about how also like for all the characters having they occasionally have to like start fighting clones, and that's really hard for them, you know. So
What's the name, real quick, of the historical planet that got destroyed?
Ego de Joritz.
Ego de Joris. Yep. I got to run, y'all, unfortunately. So I'm just going to say, stay classy, Ego de Joris.
there we go. Yeah, we'll end there. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope you read the book. Would love to hear your comments. Let us know. Members, you make everything possible. May the force be with you.
Stay classy, Ego de Joris.
I didn't get any quotes, but I would just say, stay the fuck away from Heptuinians.
So, all right, y'all. If I just leave the studio, Matthew, with that.
Yeah,
do
just
it?
Well, I'm leaving. It's been an hour, so we're going to shut it down.
Great.
Cool. Peace.
Bye.